Hey guys, glad you can join me with this. Sorry it's under such crappy circumstances, but we're going to do our best and we're going to get through this stuff. So what I want to do, I want to kind of go over some manual transmission stuff with you. I want to talk about clutch operation, shift pattern, transmission parts, and gear ratio. We've got our shift pattern up here, so we can go back to that for reference. And we've got our cutaway so that we can see what's going on actually inside. And so I just wanted to kind of show you this stuff before I take the camera and come up here and show this stuff. Alright, so first with clutch operation, what we've got right here, we've got a clutch disc. And now on this one, this is not the clutch disc that goes on this transmission. You can tell that the splines are a little bit different. And if we take this off, you can look, the splines are really coarse on here and they're really fine on this one. But it was about the same size, and so I'll put it on there just to kind of give you a visual of where it's supposed to go. Now, you can put a clutch on backwards, but please don't. If you look, let's see, somewhere on here, it will say flywheel side or transmission side. If we look right there, it says flywheel side. Yeah, so we're doing this live, no camera tricks or anything like that. So we're just going straight through. And so the flywheel side is going to go against the flywheel. Imagine that. And the other side is going to go toward the transmission or transaxle, depending on the orientation of this. With this one, this is a transmission, so that's rear wheel drive. Okay, and so under normal circumstances, that's going to be splined. The clutch disc is going to be splined to the what we'll call the input shaft of the transmission. And so if I put this in a little bit of a bind, I can actually turn those together. And so we'll use that for what we're doing. And so we've also got what we call a clutch cover or a pressure plate, and there are spring fingers in here. Okay, and it goes up against actually like this. Okay, and it's going to go, the clutch is going to sit right here against it. And so this clutch is made of fibrous material. And so if you've ever done fiberglass insulation or something like that, and you've gotten that on your hands and you can't get it off, then you know what this is like. So be real careful with this, especially if you're doing stuff on old cars or trucks. Some of those used to be asbestos, and so that's especially bad. So anyway, that's our clutch stuff. And so when we push in on the clutch pedal, we're actually disengaging the clutch. And so when we push in on the clutch pedal, it's going to push in. You can kind of see where there's a little bit of wear around here. Okay, and that'll push in on that. When it pushes in on that, it actually releases this. Okay, it pushes on this part and it allows this clutch to spin. And so since this is splined to the transmission, anytime the transmission is moving, this clutch is moving. Okay, so with our shift pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then reverse, and it's 5-speed. 4 speeds different, 3 speeds different, 6 speeds different. Okay, any of those are going to be different, but typical 5-speed stuff, that's it. And so we've got our input shaft, and that's the input coming from the engine. All the power turning this thing, it's turning from the engine. And then, of course, our shifter, and this is our output shaft. And so this is the part that goes to the drive shaft and then to the rear differential eventually. Now inside, it's a little bit different. Let me get a look in here. When we take our shifter, and we move that, it moves these shift forks. Okay? And so when we move these shift forks, what we're doing is we are locking gears in. And so you may see Let me move this out of the way. You may see that you've got something called a synchronizer right here. That's brass. It's soft, and notice that that can move just a little bit, but the little teeth line up perfectly. This blocker ring, they line up perfectly with the teeth on here, but it can move to one side or the other. And so as this is turning, this can turn a little bit independently. And so when we go to shift into a gear, notice how it's got like a pointed edge on it. And so it's going to guide this onto the teeth, and that's what keeps us from grinding. Okay, no matter what's going on here, even if that's still spinning, because whenever we shift gears, the engine's still turning, right? So we've got our input shaft, we've got our output shaft, and those are actually not the same thing. They're in line with one another, but they're not the same thing. There's not a shaft that goes all the way from one end to the other. And then you've got at the bottom what's called a counter shaft. Okay, and so the counter shaft has these gears that are in mesh with each of these. Okay, and that can kind of freewheel depending on which gear is locked in. And so what I kind of want to do, I want to go through each gear and show you how this stuff works. Okay, and so what we'll do, we'll start in neutral. So with neutral, input shaft can spin. Now the output shaft is spinning, but it's not locked in, and so it can spin free. Okay. So if I were to hold this, you can hear it turning. So one can spin independently of the other. So if we're in neutral, it doesn't really matter what the engine's doing. The drive wheels can do whatever they want. So we're gonna go shift pattern. We're gonna go over and up. Over and up, we're in first gear. And so what first gear means, that means low speed, high torque. Okay, we want high torque so that we can move the car from a standstill. And so if we're turning this, if we turn this at a certain speed, okay, we can see that the output shaft is moving much slower than the input shaft. And we can actually see which gear is locked in. Sorry, that one right there. Notice that the driving gear is really big, the one that's locked in. Okay, and so we're locking that input shaft through this gear to the counter shaft and then up. And so when we shift from first gear into second gear, speed-wise, the output shaft is moving a little bit faster, but still not really fast. But the gear that we've locked in is a little bit smaller. So the driving gear is just a little bit smaller. Okay, and so if we go from second to third, we'll go up, over, up. Okay, we'll see where third is. Right there. And this gear is a little bit smaller still. So we're starting to see a pattern, right? As we go into higher gears, they're starting to get smaller. And so we go from this driven gear down to the counter shaft. And so as we turn this, we're almost at the same speed, aren't we? Okay, now fourth gear is a little bit different. In a 5-speed transmission, fourth gear is what we call 1-to-1. Okay, so if we take this out and we put it in fourth gear, the only thing we do there is lock the input shaft to the output shaft. So same speed, same direction. Okay, in all 4-speed and 5-speed transmissions, Fourth gear is 1-to-1. That means for every rotation of the input shaft, you have a rotation of the output shaft. Same direction, same speed. 5-speed, fifth gear is an overdrive gear. So you've got higher speed, lower torque. And then 6 speeds, 5 and 6 are overdrive gears. Okay, so we're in fourth right now. We're locked in. That means our input shaft and our output shaft are locked together. But I also want you, while we're talking about this, look at the direction of the counter shaft. It's different, isn't it? See how it's turning in a different direction from the input shaft? We'll talk about why that's important here in just a minute. But when we go from fourth up to fifth, with fifth gear, we've got a really small gear. Okay, really small gear. And so we've locked that small gear in, and as we turn this, it's a little bit harder to turn the input shaft, but the output shaft goes really fast compared to the input shaft speed. And so we've got a small gear driving a big gear. Okay. So those are our 5 speeds. Now what we've not talked about yet is reverse. Okay. So if we go into neutral, go all the way over and back, can we see where reverse is locking in? Okay. When reverse locks in, we're doing a little bit different stuff. Notice that the 2 gears that we're looking at right here, the reverse gear, okay, those are actually going the same direction. Okay, so we've got an idler gear. We've got an idler gear that allows us to change the direction. Okay, and so that's what gives us our reverse. So reverse is really low. So I'm going this way. Output shaft is coming the other way. And so reverse is a really low gear and it changes direction. Okay, so that's just a little bit about what I wanted to talk to you about with transmissions and clutches and stuff like that. As we get more into this stuff, we'll talk about some of the other parts, pilot bushings and bearings and throwout bearings, how to service those things, and stuff like that. So if you have any questions, let me know, and stay safe and stay healthy.